In this video, we will be tasting and talking about our spring 2022 harvest of Eco-Farmed High Mountain Oolong tea from Taiwan. We're here tasting our spring 2022 batch of Eco-Farmed High Mountain Oolong tea from Taiwan. And eco-farmed is a term that Ecocha has coined to designate tea that we source from certified organic tea farms. We do not represent the organic certification, but they are indeed from farms that have organic certification here in Taiwan. Having said all that, this is probably the most, well, let's just say it's our favorite organic tea farm, personally speaking. We've come to know these people in recent years. It's one of our most recent sources, but we've gotten to know them very well, mostly because we are endeavoring to make a documentary of their life story. They are Aboriginal people from Nantou County, the Bunun tribe, and I personally have been visiting their area, and the hot spring that the husband actually built along with the campground beside it for 30 years. And I've observed the adjacent tea farm and thought about finding out whose farm it is. At some point about 10 years ago, I noticed that it looked like it was left fallow, basically just not managed at all. The tea plants, the trees kind of withered, and it wasn't being fed by fertilizers or anything, quite obviously. And I found that quite sad. It continued to survive and improved over time, and that indeed was the transition period from going from conventional farming to organic farming. So one day, maybe 4 years ago, the little brother who is now managing the hot spring campground, I sat down to tea with him, and I asked him about the adjacent farm, and he's like, that's my family farm, and my oldest brother is taking care of it and now has organic certification. Here's a bag of his recent harvest. And that's when I was able to call them up and go visit them. And we became friends very quickly. They are dear people in my personal life. And Ecocha is in full support of their efforts. They're doing quite well as organic farmers. They not only continue to maintain their pre-existing tea farm, they've become producers of artichokes for a health food supplement company, contracted, the company buys the full crop. And they have a beautiful piece of land, and some of the most remote land that is farmed in Taiwan. It's just on the border of the Yushan National Park, which is, Yushan means Jade Mountain. Jade Mountain is the highest peak on Taiwan and also the highest peak in East Asia. It's 3,980 plus meters, I believe, the peak is. A very majestic area, very much mostly populated by this particular tribe of Taiwan Aboriginals, the Bunun tribe. They've entered, there has been a national organic tea competition here in Taiwan. I believe it's the third year. Last year was canceled due to COVID. They held the competition this year. This particular batch of tea won 2 prizes. One of which is the second highest category award. They have 2 plots of tea, and our batch, I decided to mix, there were 2 consecutive days of harvest, one from their larger plot, which is more maintained. It gets irrigated with natural, what would you call that in English? It's like a brine, my English is failing me. It's a substance that is a combination of fruits and live bacteria, and they spray it on the tea trees to act both as a pesticide and as a fertilizer. It actually stimulates the leaf growth causing or at least encouraging the plant to sprout new leaves. And then the live bacteria helps to prevent mold growth, and their big plot is managed in an organic farming method kind of way. The plot next to the hot spring is what in Chinese is called ye fang, which could simply mean left fallow. They don't do anything to manage the farm other than to keep the weed growth low enough to not bury the tea trees in weed growth. Basically, the farm would disappear within a couple of years if they didn't cut the weeds back. Cutting the weeds back does create eventual fertilizer, and it also helps foster an ecosystem on top of the ground within the soil, keeps the moisture in. So it is slowly being fertilized, but very, very slowly, and not anything like the farm that they administer fertilizer only once every 2 or 3 years, actual organic fertilizer, and then they use this concoction that they spray on the leaves on their main farm. So, long story short, I tasted both days of harvest side by side, and they both had their own pros and cons, or at least they both had a distinctive flavor. So we decided to mix them together and brew a half and half brew, and that's the one that I went with, and just to kind of get the best of both worlds. It's something that we basically never do with high mountain oolong in general, particularly from conventional farms. It is done for competitions, particularly when you get into roasted tea competitions. Our Yushan Baozhong tea farmer mixes different days of harvest sometimes when he feels like this one's it's got a really nice fragrance, this one has a nice body, let's put them together and get a nice balance. So our friends submitted 2 separate batches into the organic tea competition, one from the big plot of tea, one from the smaller plot of tea, and indeed the higher ranking award was received by the tea that comes from their main farm. All right, there's the background. I'm gonna start tasting this before I just talk myself blue. Interesting, it's definitely changed. There's nothing in here. I put the leaves out to observe them. When I first dumped the leaves out and smelled the pot when it was still warm, I got a real strong hit of coconut macaroons. It was just sweet and creamy. This tea has been bitten by the green leafhopper to an extent, perhaps more in the wild farm next to the hot spring, but basically any organic farm is going to be affected to an extent by the green leafhopper almost any season. It's just it's a gradation, and sometimes it's more obvious, sometimes it's less. I did about a 1:15, maybe 1:16 brewing ratio. I put a little bit less than 12 grams of tea in this 175 milliliter pot. I brewed the first brew for a little over a minute, the second brew for under a minute, and then the third brew for maybe 1 minute 20 seconds, fourth brew 1 minute 40 seconds, and I have the fifth brew here that went up to close to 2 minutes. Tea is cooled to room temperature. Definitely bug-bitten tea. Thick body. Floral. It's got a bitter base, so it's not, the sweet factor is mostly in the aroma more than on the palate. We took this Mao cha, which means straight out of the factory, ungroomed tea, and brought it to our friend in Lugu, and he had it destemmed, and then he roasted it for us to his own discretion, basically. I said, I'm basically shooting for a light roast. I just want to bring out those qualities. With an organic produce like this, there's a lot of variation in the actual leaf growth, mature to immature to well matured. And then the processing, they have thicker stems. It's a little bit, because of the spectrum of maturity, the degree of maturity, it's more challenging to process evenly. And one way you can help to reach an ideal end result is to remove some of the stem material and then roast it at least mildly or lightly. And that kind of evens things out a bit more. It also brings out the constituents within the leaves more. It gets rid of any sort of muddled, there's a word in Chinese called zawei, and it's kind of confused or complex or complicated, and you want to kind of do whatever you can do to purify that and make it a more uniform and balanced and integrated flavor. So that's the art of roasting, to do that. And I think it was quite successful in that respect. I have not tasted this since I picked up the batch from my friend who roasted it, which was weeks ago. We've been waiting for a couple of reasons to introduce this batch. One is that we've decided to make this tea selection part of our Black Label limited edition series, which we've just started to compose, really. We have 2 Black Label teas on the shelf now. We're going to be adding this one, or we are adding this one right now, and we have a few more to come. And then we'll kind of make an official announcement about our Black Label limited edition teas. It basically comes down to high quality teas that are in limited supply. That's a fact. This farm produces very minimal quantities of tea. The amount they harvest and process per harvest is a fraction of what most other farms do. I'm talking and consuming without totally taking notes from one to one. I did think about it. I was talking. These tasted quite similar to each other to me. Let's concentrate for a second. What is it? It's almost like a mild yellow curry, like a turmeric, herbal, soft herbal quality, something flowery. It's sort of a mellow floral and aromatic herb quality. It does remind me of ground Indian spices that go into a curry. I don't think it's, I'd have to taste saffron again to really give it a valid reference to that. But it's definitely got that light, vibrant kind of floral quality to it, and then also a little bit of a deeper musky quality to it as well. It's got a nice balance of the tea is. It's got a nice thick mouthfeel, but it's substantial. There's definite bitterness and a touch of astringency as you swallow the tea. 4th brew. I love when roasting brings out and it does achieve a more balanced composition, but maintains a freshness. I can still get that High Mountain Oolong flavor from this, even though it has been transformed. I drank most of the cups of tea, but it's a beautiful golden, rich golden color. So it's definitely a few gradations away from the more yellowish green commonly found High Mountain Oolong. Deep, rich golden, not really orange. It doesn't go to that level of roast. So I definitely think it would be still considered a light roast oolong tea. There's just a lot of substance to these leaves. I didn't bring my glasses. Oh well, I'll have to go by feel and what I can see. It's obvious that the stem material has been largely removed, although we asked for just a slight trim. This is definitely, there would be more stems removed if this were being entered into a standardized competition. When you're going to roast, it definitely helps because it allows you to roast the overall material more. See, yeah, there's still some stems in here. That's a pretty large stem. So they didn't go crazy. It was reduced quite a bit. The amount we bought was reduced by about 1/5. Just by destemming and roasting. So that's definitely significant, but we think it's worth it. The leaves have a thickness to them, a hardiness to them. They grow more slowly. They're dealing with more pests and a bit more harsh growing conditions, basically. But this environment up there is pretty much our favorite place on the island, if not in the world. It has a lot to do with our friends who are stewards of the land. We will be documenting this and sharing bits and pieces as we create a short documentary of their farm and their life. It really is a treasure. The land and the people and the farm and the story behind it all is something very specific and unique in my 30 years of roaming tea country. And I feel very privileged and honored to be able to share the tea and the story of my dear friends with the people that appreciate their tea. Okay, let me get back to drinking tea. Trying to go through the steps evenly. I should have looked at the dried leaves first. The dry leaves have a really nice uniformity to them, both in shape and color. There's almost no visible stem material, a little bit of light golden brown that reveals the stem material, but mostly this kind of deep dark green and brownish hues, very even coloration, so the roasting was skillful. We appreciate having friends like our friend who just retired from being a tea judge at the largest oolong tea competition in the world, the Lugu Farmers Association Dongding Oolong Tea Competition. He is a traditional oolong artisan himself and just knows what he's doing. Okay, I want to do a quick sip of the fifth brew, which I let go for almost 2 minutes. Before I do that, because that's bound to be super intense, this is a combination of first to fourth brew. It's like a really good amber beer, microbrew. The word golden just comes to mind when you drink it. Heady nose, that kind of crossover from fresh floral into turmeric powder, or some warming spices. That's a delicious brew. That's my favorite out of the over the four. The mixture is, let's see what the fifth brew got. I'm getting into sweat. I just drank a lot. This is super powerful tea. I definitely want to mention that you can brew it at a much lighter ratio. In fact, 1:15 is really max. I'm going to go ahead and say I would recommend starting at like 1:17 or maybe even 1:20. So what would that be? 5 grams of leaves for 100 milliliters, 10 grams of leaf for 200 milliliters. You'll get a lot more complexity that way, and then you can go stronger incrementally and reach that level of powerful, kind of a denser composition. I'm definitely all of a sudden getting really high on tea. It's not overly brewed at all. No, I'd say it's on par with the first 4 brews. So it just kind of is testimony to the solidness of the brew. It's not too fickle in its brewing. Wow, super powerful, eco-farmed high mountain tea from one of the most beautiful and remote places that I've been on this island, particularly in terms of developed farm areas. We are so honored to offer this tea, and stay tuned for the story behind it. We'll offer it in increments and then in a complete story eventually. Thanks for being with us.